What's the most ultimate petty revenge you've seen or been a part of? You youngins here might not believe it, but back in the early 90s, supermarket cashiers had to type every price in by hand. I was at a Vons in San Diego, walking toward the only open check stand with a single bottle of soda in my hand. Suddenly, this hoity-toity lady, with a cart stacked to the top, flew out of one of the aisles like a freight train and cut me off. "I'm in a hurry," she said, then looked away like she was annoyed that I'd been born. I looked at the cashier. He rolled his eyes and got to work. 5 minutes later, she's walking out the door and it's my turn. "You're good," says the cashier. "I put your soda on her tag. Damn, that felt good." Story 2. I used to deliver pizza for Domino's. It was my last shift and there was this house that was always rude. I called to ask what the house looked like and they said, "I gave you the address," and hung up, never tipped, etc. I got to their house and they gave me a check for 1 cent less than what the total was. I said, "I am going to need the extra penny." They grumbled off and took their time, hoping I would give up, but I just sat there holding the pizza. They finally came back all pissed off and gave me the penny. Note that they had no intention of tipping. They gave me the penny and I chucked it out into the street and left. They saw me do it. It was satisfying. Story 3. I occasionally deliver pizza as a part-time job. There's a customer that tends to pay with a big bag of change. I don't mean a bag full of quarters. I mean a bag full of dimes, nickels, and pennies. Since his meal typically costs about $20, the bag usually weighs several pounds. It is a total pain to count out all of the change. So typically, drivers will just assume that he has the correct amount and leave. Usually he has just enough or maybe a few cents over. I don't think it is an innocent thing either, as he usually gives the bag of change with a crap-eating grin. It is such a pain that most of the drivers know his address by heart and avoid going to his house, if at all possible. I was having a bad night and by the luck of the draw, got this dude's house. I remembered someone paying in a checkout line with a bag of change, and I knew I could use a similar method to take my frustration out on this guy in the pettiest way possible. I pulled up to his house and left the pizza in the car. I rang the doorbell, and when he answered, I saw the large bag of change in his hand that I knew would be there. He asked where his pizza was, and I said, "New policy, sir. Gotta count it out before we can give out the pizza." So I sat down on his doorstep and started to count out all of the change. At one point, I even asked if he could turn on his porch light, because I was having a hard time seeing. He did end up sitting there while I counted out the entire bag of change, even though it took about 10 minutes. He ended up being about $1 over. So I started picking up pennies to give him his change back. When he said that I could keep the rest as a tip, when I gave him his pizza, he sheepishly told me sorry and then shut the door. The whole situation was incredibly awkward, and to my knowledge, he hasn't ordered pizza from us in a while. Oh well. Story 4. There was this kid, about 15, who cut in line in front of me at the supermarket. When he wasn't watching, I broke his chocolate bar while still inside the wrapper. Later, I saw him cycling by, opening his bar, and half of it fell out. He got pissy and I chuckled. Story 5. Knew a crazy kid in elementary. Kid jumped across the table and tried to beat me. I got suspended BC. I instigated it by saying he was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. When that the only thing that kid ever talked about and was wearing a Cocoa Puff shirt that day. Senior year of high school kid was in my design class. Needed to get a C or better on the final. Over the year, I found out the kid was taking my work off my share drive. High school, it was dumb, and each kid's folder was public, and copying it. For the final, I purposely ducked up the drawing in my folder, but the kid didn't double-check it. He turned it in and failed and had to go back and be a super senior. I turned in an A+ WG, left a crap WG in its place. Story 6. When me and my ex-fiance were having a bunch of arguments after we broke up, I got tired of her constantly texting me about nonsense, so I called Insert Phone Carrier to have them cut off service to her phone that I paid for in the middle of an argument. Story 7. My roommate in college was a selfish banana. Now I have known him since preschool and we are still friends, but he is one of those people you cannot live with. He attended the local tech school that is supposed to be a pipeline into the main school that third roommate and I attended. However, he barely went to class and sat around getting high and playing Xbox. My Xbox specifically, which is where this story begins. He used to have friends over all the time, and mostly, they'd get baked and play Xbox in the living room. Now I don't like having a TV in my bedroom, so I set up my flat screen and Xbox in the living room. I'd like to note that both he and third roommate had Xboxes as well, but they had theirs set up in their respective room. When the latest, at the time, Call of Duty came out, we would spend hours playing together in a big squad. That is until third roommate's Xbox got the red ring of death. Shortly after, my Xbox got the red ring of death. Well, we think it's all good because banana roommate has the next-gen Xbox 360. That wasn't prone to the same issue. We'll just move his Xbox out to the living room so we can keep playing COD Zombies. The response third roommate and I got was, and I quote, "Nah, I don't want people playing it all the time because it will probably break. Plus, what if you and third roommate are playing it and I want to play by myself?" We were livid. How could he spend all that time using my stuff and not extend the same courtesy? At the time, I had supplied the router for the internet in the house, which meant I alone had the admin password. I also found out you can block specific MAC addresses. Well, guess who couldn't connect to Xbox Live when he wanted to play online? I would turn it on and off sporadically over the next few weeks. I found out he spent like 4 hours calling both Time Warner and Microsoft, trying to get the issue resolved. Eventually, he started to put 2 and 2 together about when it would go out and come back. You'd think I would stop, but I adapted. I found out that you could open a port to remotely access your router from the internet. At the time, I had a BlackBerry, I know, which could load the HTML router config page. Thus, I started turning off his access when I was gone. I was even away one weekend at our rival school and shut him down from 3 hours away. To this day, he still doesn't know it was me. I still go over to his house and hang out on the weekends. Duck you, dude. I know they taught us sharing in preschool, saying I was the idiot in the situation. I think you're confused that this is some sort of revenge, friendship-ending act, when really it was me elaborately pranking a friend of 20 years. Yes, he was a banana, in the sense that he was still immature in a lot of ways, because he had never lived on his own. He never cleaned, did his part in the household, etc. He's cool now that life smacked him around a bit. He just needed to grow up at the time. My real gripe was not that I couldn't use his Xbox. It was that we no longer would sit down as 3 friends, crack some beers, and laugh having fun trying to beat each other's high round score in zombies. It was like us being social together, stopped because he wanted to play M2 by himself and shut us out. Story 8. My roommate and her so loved doing elaborate jigsaw puzzles. After I found out she canceled our lease, leaving me 1 week to find a new place to live, I threw away one piece of 2 different puzzles they were working on. Before you ask, she was able to do this because I was 17 and not able to legally sign a lease. Edit, I'm a she. Dad was on a boat. Mom was, I'd care where that crazy girl was at. Everything turned out cool. I'm married and am a mom to an awesome little girl. I don't know why the adults in my life let things go down like that. Maybe because we live in a certain southern state that rhymes with Malabama. Story 9. A girl on my softball team bullied me and spread rumors about me to the team and coaches. We were competing for the same position. She was in my geometry class and tried to buddy up to me because I was good at geometry and she wasn't. So for a while I let her copy my homework. Then one day I gave her all the wrong answers and turned in the right answers for myself. Story 10. My neighbor's dog craps in our yard all of the time. It wouldn't be a big deal, except he never cleans up after her. I finally had enough, so I decided to go with a classic. I put a flaming bag of his dog's crap on his porch, rang the bell, and hid in the bushes. When he answered the door, I finally got my revenge by having an affair with his wife for the last 3.5 years. Story 11. My sister said some pretty mean things to me in front of my friends when I was younger, so I put a slice of bologna in her Walkman CD player. I got the idea from Corey in the show That's So Raven. Story 12. Boss paged me on my wedding night. Yeah, bad on me for leaving the pager on, but in my defense, it automatically turned on after charging, and I wanted to have a full battery before setting off on my honeymoon trip. He did it as a joke, but it came at an, inappropriate moment. We had a page only if something's on fire policy, so I had to call in even though I had just gotten married and was about to go on 2 weeks vacation. When he answered, he laughed so hard, I just had to do something about it. So when I got back, I programmed the mail servers to call out on their phone lines and hit his pager with dial-back numbers for phone sex services at 4 a.m. every day. His wife got this pager before he did one time and saw a text message, something like, I loved how you described how you would duck me, Jerry. Call back when your wife's gone for the day. Wife was not amused. She thought he'd been calling phone operators and tore him a new one. He knew it was me, but he was too stubborn to ask me to call it off. So it kept up for weeks until he finally figured out where the script was running from and used it to page me instead. We had a back and forth pager war for a while, but then it all ducked up. When an actual data center emergency happened, and one of us ignored the page thinking it was the other pranking him. That ended the fun. Story 13. Early in a game of Civ V, Alexander stole Petra from me at the last second, so I built a special city in the frozen wastes, blocked it in with my own cities, gifted it to him, then burned the rest of his empire to the ground. It took about 5 hours. I like to think he learned his lesson, but that forward-settling duck still looks as smug as ever. Story 14. My little brother and his girlfriend came to stay at my house for the weekend, and the girlfriend was super self-centered and obnoxious. When they left, she forgot her clothes and toiletries because she left them sprawled all over my bathroom. About a week later, she and my brother moved into an apartment together. After he paid for the moving truck, deposit, and utilities, she cheated on him with her ex and kicked him out of the apartment. This left him broke, homeless, and heartbroken. In the days after the breakup, she kept calling and emailing him several times per day, demanding that he ask me to ship her clothes and toiletries back to her. I mean, it's really important. It's my North Face. My brother called and pleaded with me to ship them to her, so she would stop having a reason to contact him, being the loving sister that I am. I gathered up the really important North Face sweatshirt, shorts, underwear, shampoo, conditioner, soap, and razor. I folded everything nicely. I then wrote a nice note apologizing for taking so long to mail them to her, and let her know that I hope all is well. The note was written in permanent marker, and the paper happened to be resting on the really important north face when I wrote it. Unfortunately, the ink bled straight through the paper and onto the shirt. Also, unfortunately, the shampoo, soap, and conditioner caps were not tightly secured on their bottles, and the contents leaked out all over the clothes, further spreading the ink. The most unfortunate result, though, was that her razor didn't have any sort of protective cap or container and left little slashes all over the front of the really important north face. She received the package, and my brother never heard from her again. Story 15. My wife used to keep these little Godiva chocolates that she likes in her desk at work, but started noticing some of them missing and figured it must be someone from the overnight cleaning staff taking them. Fed up with losing her not inexpensive treats, she decided to get revenge on the choco thief in question by replacing the good chocolate with little squares of chocolate laxatives that looked just like real candies. The next morning, she saw several of the laxatives gone, and then from that day forward, she was never missing another one of her good chocolates ever again. Story 16. Unused to work shifts many years ago, including regular night shifts. My boss was an unpleasant person, to say the least. He would leave his keys on top of his locker. One night, I took a small file to work and filed down 1 or 2 teeth of his front door key. The next day, he was telling everyone of how he got home, and his door lock was broken, and he had to get a locksmith out, which cost a fortune, and he didn't get much sleep. Happened again a couple of months later. Then his car key got some treatment. I stopped after that as I heard him mention it was getting suspicious that all these locks stopped working. But unknown to me, other colleagues also disliked him. One night, his locker disappeared entirely. Rumor has it that it's part of the foundations of an office block in London now. Story 17. Late and not as sophisticated as most, but I started in a new job 2 years ago and hated a guy that kept joking about me. So I got his phone number and announced his PS4 for sale for like $50. Same day during lunch, he was already nuts because of the calls. Obviously found a way to remove it, but it was nice to watch. Story 18. When I was in 7th grade, the startup my dad was a part of was failing miserably in no small part due to a crazy CEO. While at his house, my dad observed the CEO's toddler daughter picking up a piece of dog crap and licking it. He picked her up and told her to give her dad a kiss. Story 19. A horrible former coworker always claimed she worked way more hours than she actually did, and when she was at work, she just browsed Facebook all day. The owner was very hands-off and just let her do whatever she wanted, despite me going to him with proof. So I decided to take revenge. She was not computer savvy at all, so I removed Internet Explorer from her desktop and installed an identical icon that, when clicked, would instantly restart the computer. It was so satisfying when she would forget and click it, losing anything that she was working on. She would always grumble and complain about the virus on her computer. I started a new job about 3 weeks later, and when I left, it was still giving her problems. Story 20. My mom and dad. This happened when I was in my late 20s. My mom and I were in the car. My dad called and they started bickering with each other. My mom got irritated and hung up on him. He called her right back, and when she answered, he hung up on her. Didn't even say a word. Just waited for her to pick and hung up. It was so petty and hilarious to see my parents acting like children. I couldn't stop laughing. They've been married over 35 years. I still get tickled when I think about that. Story 21. I lived in a cheap, crappy apartment with roommates, and we all worked in fast food. Money was tight. One roommate ended up unemployed for a few weeks and then got a job as a bank teller, making much better money. However, while unemployed, she had missed a rent payment, which we had sighed together to cover for her. 2 weeks into the new job, she gets her first paycheck. Obviously, we are expecting immediate payback. Day one, she says something along the lines of, she couldn't do personal business cash or check during work, so she could pay us in a couple of days. The Friday she was supposed to pay us, she comes home with a big shopping bag and casually mentions she can't pay back rent yet because she had to buy new work clothes. When roommates and I got upset, she went total git on us, that we didn't understand how to work a professional job because we were only food service, and basically told us we would get our money when she felt like it. That weekend, she misplaced her name tag required at work. She spent hours searching for it. At some point, I came across the name tag in a random spot and said nothing. She kept searching for it all weekend and was panicked that she would look bad to her boss, etc. I never moved or took the name tag, but the whole time I knew where it was. She never found it and had to get a new one. She also never paid the back rent, and we kicked her out a few weeks later. Story 22. During my freshman year of high school, I was in a biology class that was made up of mainly juniors. This one guy who sat next to me would always be a git to me during class. I always did well on the tests, so he would always look over and copy the answers from my Scantron. I'm pretty sure he didn't realize that I knew he was cheating off of me. Well, one day I got fed up with this guy messing with me and cheating off of me. So the next test comes around, and sure enough, he starts copying my answers I finish the test, and so does he. He gets up and turns his test in and comes back to his seat. I looked him in the eyes and proceeded to erase my entire Scantron. I then retook the test, this time marking the correct answers. The look of panic in his eyes was so satisfying. He ended up making a 2% on that test and never cheated off me again. Story 23. In grade school, I kept a bag of chips in the same pocket every day of my backpack. This kid I knew would punch that pocket any chance he could for 5 days in a row. One day I replaced the chips with a bag of sewing pins. He never did it again. Sweet justice. Story 24. I worked at a 50K plus tech company. I worked with a PM, Maggie, who misread my email and got her dates messed up. She scheduled a meeting for Thursday instead of Friday. When I told her she scheduled on the wrong day, she got mad at me and emailed all my managers up to my vice president, 4 levels of management, to say how much of a troublemaker I was. It was her own fault for not being able to read. 2 years later, I have to work with her again, and I pretend like I'm all happy and friends with her. 2 years after that, I quit and move on to a better company. I get an email saying that Maggie is applying to my new company and said I could provide a positive reference for her. I email the recruiter and blast all my 6 years of crap on her and block her from getting hired. Take that, Maggie, you ducker. I never forget. Story 25. I saw an ad for a work-from-home type job. It didn't sound scammy and sounded sort of legit, so I asked for more info from the website. Enter your email thing. It was crap and was sending me spam several times a day. For whatever reason, blocking it didn't work. I got annoyed one day and answered back, "Stop spamming me." The guy actually answered. He actually monitors that address. He told me to unsubscribe, which did nothing. After about another week of it, I came up with an idea. I took his email address he answered from and added it to his own list, then signed it up for any other spam I could find. A few days later, it stopped spamming me. Story 26. This was my best revenge. I went through an awful divorce. My ex-wife cheated on me, told lies about me, and all throughout the divorce, I took the high road and was there for my kids, while she disappeared off the face of the earth. Her birthday was only a couple of weeks after the divorce was final. As the kids were young, I was a good guy and purchased several presents from the kids to her. Among the gifts, I bought a necklace with a big red A at the end. Her first name is Anne. I had the kids give that to her, and she wore her Scarlet Letter all around town. Most people in our town knew what she had done, and some even were aware of the necklace. Yep, I made my adulterous ex-wife wear the Scarlet Letter. Story 27. When I was a kid, I attempted to call my aunt. For whatever reason, I accidentally dialed a 6 instead of a 3, and this man cursed me out for being a telemarketer. I was so stunned, I didn't even hang up initially. My petty revenge was giving the number to all my friends, and for about 2 weeks, we called him every day at all hours. Story 28. Not me, but a friend's story from his time in the military. Receives care package from grandparents of 7 pounds of homemade fudge and cookies, but immediately has to go on a long mission, like 2 months long. Instructs his bunkmates to wait for his return, and all will be shared. He returns, there's less than a pound left. There's initial outrage to be sure, but he's calm about it. You'd rather see his outrage than his calm face, because that's when he's plotting your demise. Weeks and months pass, and he has plotted. Finally, he's scheduled to be in the same vehicle as them. The night before, he chows down on 2 boxes of Oreos and a gallon of milk. Lactose intolerant. His head is sticking out the top hatch and made a seal with his belt and equipment. Just as they got too far to return, he lets loose the most vile, sickening flatulence. He was happy to, quite literally, crap his pants. The guys inside ended up vomiting all over the inside of the vehicle and ended up having to pay my friend back the market value of the fudge, which he never got to taste again because his grandmother passed away before being able to make another batch. Story 29. My sister and I once applied for a summer job. I was in charge dropping the applications off to the company one day. I got there after a 40-minute commute. It was closed, so I just drove back home. My sister was mad at me for not dropping them off, regardless of the circumstances. She told me she was going to go there herself and drop her application and not mine, since I didn't do it right the first time. My parents found out about this and made her drive a second trip to drop off my application as well, since she was being petty and wouldn't take it the first time. Story 30. Now, this was a couple years back when I was in college. My friend, we'll call her Susie, and I were both going into our second years. So was her boyfriend Brad, his real name because duck you, Brad. So Susie finds out that she has herpes. The only guy she has ever been with is Brad. Naturally, she is devastated to find out he's been cheating. We find out that she is not the only one he infected. There are in fact at least 5 other women we find out about. What's more, we find out Brad has known that he is positive and still going around hooking up with people and saying that he is healthy. Basically, his attitude is that someone gave it to him, so why would it be wrong for him to spread it too? Yeah, Brad is in a hole of epic proportions. Susie is just devastated and can't get out of her funk and what she now has to deal with health-wise. Now there is an urban legend, whereas revenge a woman hid, I think, Shrimp and her cheating sews curtain rods when she was forced to move out of their apartment. This story has been featured on many shows about urban legend. It just so happened to come on late one night when me and Susie were watching TV. Problem was, Brad had 5 roommates, so no way that was going to work. But wait, Brad has a car. And Brad is too broke to afford a new car anytime soon. She knows the door code to unlock the vehicle, and I just so happen to know how to remove certain vehicle panels to access holes in other panels that it would be impossible to get shrimp out of. Plus, he worked the early shift on Wednesday. Lucky us, it's Tuesday night. So off we go to the store to buy the clearance section of meat and seafood out. We're talking ground beef, shrimp, imitation crab meat, various kinds of fish, and deviled eggs. Oh, and during this lovely time of September, our little town was experiencing a triple-digit heat wave. So off we go in the middle of the night when it's still 90 degrees out and get to work. Luckily for us, Brad lives in a crafty apartment with no security cameras and other tenants who don't care about 2 women working on a vehicle at 1 a.m. Sure enough, the door key code still works. So we pop out these little covers on the doors panels that access the interior of the door. In goes the tiny little shrimps. Then we remove the plastic panels from the wheel wells. And in goes some ground beef and deviled eggs. Next was his lift gate. Anyway, you get the idea. We put his car back together and off we go. Over the next few days, the smell just got worse and worse. The apartment complex manager asked him to move the car off grounds because of the smell. Our town also has some mean feral cats that roam around. They just ducking loved hanging around his car. So not only did it stink, but he risked being attacked by some mean-ass feral cats. He would have to always have the windows cracked open at least a little. Best part is Brad and I have the same major. So over the next 3 years, I see him a lot. He became notorious for his horrible smelling car. He couldn't afford to replace it. No one would buy it, no matter how many times he had it cleaned. The smell remained, and no one could figure out where the odor was coming from. Even if they had figured it out, most of the panels would need to be completely replaced because the only access is tiny holes. To this day, people still ask him about his car on Facebook. Like, if he says he will pick people up, they ask him if he has a new car. Nope. Still the stink mobile. He currently works at Starbucks, so that thing isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Kind of like his herpes. I like to think of this as my ultimate Sherlock Holmes level petty revenge. Prank. I will never top the awesomeness of this one. It was my ducking masterpiece. She didn't want to file charges as it would become public record. We did report him anonymously to the CDC. Someone did go and talk to him that he had been named in several complaints. We encouraged the other women we knew of to do the same. One woman filed a lawsuit against him, but it's hard to prove in court that he did it intentionally. Nothing came of it. Your own personal doctor or your local Planned Parenthood, if you live in the US, can provide you with information of STD and how to prevent the spread or prevent contracting something. Planned Parenthood also provides low-cost or free screenings. Many adults do not display symptoms, so it is worth getting checked out on a regular basis. It doesn't hurt to do it, but it could hurt not to. Story 31. So this was in the video game EVE Online. The game has a PvP, player versus player policy of punish instead of prevent, meaning that anywhere in the game, anyone can legally shoot anyone for any reason. There are certain places where if you shoot someone first, then your own ship will be shot by invincible NPC police. However, there's a time gap between when you start shooting the innocent player and when the NPC police hit your ship. 10 seconds. So players will gank other innocent players, knowing full well they will lose their own ship as a result. This is allowed and encouraged by the devs and is one of the most defining features of EVE Online. So this one dude gets bored and decides to gank a very new player who is in a practically free ship. Keep in mind, the attacking player's ship is easily worth 5 times this new player's ship, and he is doing this purely as a troll. So 15 seconds later, there are 2 exploded ships. The new player just goes off, like a solid 15-minute rant of pure 13-year-old rage. He explains that this very cheap ship is his entire net worth and that he will be quitting the game because he has nothing left. The attacking player actually feels pretty bad, and because EVE is notorious for not retaining new players, decides to reimburse the new player's ship. He gives the guy 100 million ISK, the in-game currents. Now, this is a huge amount of money to a new player. The new player could afford about 100 of the ship he just lost. This is enough to keep the new player going for months. Then, 30 seconds after giving the new player the money, the old player gets a notification. New player has placed a bounty on your head for $100 million ISK. The new player took every last cent and used it to put a price on the old players. Now anyone who hit the old player will get the bounty. The new player then logged off. I can't recall the chat logs, but they looked something like, "Old player, hey, I am sorry about your ship. I gave you 100 million to keep you going for the next month or so. New player has placed a bounty on your head for $100 million, Isk. New player has logged off. Edit. Shameless shoutout. Eve is now free to play. It is also more new player friendly than ever. If you would like to give it a try, PM me. I am in a 5,000 person nullsec alliance that takes in and trains day one players. We even have a dojo plan that provides new players with a welcome package of free ships and skill books. We have no time requirements or participation requirements either. Joining takes less than an hour, and we have people that will walk you through it. Story 32. I had a rival in high school because we got almost the same marks in everything, so I would sabotage him in harmless ways whenever I could. My most frequent one was to empty out the contents of his pencil case, then turn the pencil case inside out before refilling the pencil case with its contents and carefully zipping it closed with the pull tab on the inside. He still doesn't know it was me doing it because it would happen while he was in the bathroom and not at his desk. Story 33. My dad wants to chop down the trees in our yard. He has had to rake their leaves over the last 20 years. He is retired now and now hires people to do the raking. My mom loves the trees because she loves nature, so they frequently fight over it. My mom wants to go to Europe with my dad, and my dad wants the trees cut down. He refuses to go to Europe until at least 2 trees, of his choosing, are chopped down. My mom won't let him chop them down, so they aren't going anywhere. When I asked my dad why he wants to cut them down so badly, since he doesn't even rake anymore, he professed his deep-seated hatred for those damn trees. He wanted them dead for revenge. Seemed like he had PTSD too. The trees remind him of all the horrible memories raking. Edit. Everyone recommending to poison the trees. I appreciate the idea, but I don't want to do that to my mom. And she would probably find out anyway. She's smart. It would be disastrous for me and my dad. Even if he had nothing to do with it, she would blame him. Story 34. I was in the Navy, and on my first ship, I had a small group of friends. We were very close and spent most of our time together. In the military, you have to build up time to take off, and 2 of my friends decided to take a trip to Ohio for some reason. They went through the process of requesting the time off and got it approved. They were in the process of booking a flight when another one of our shipmates, sailors, overheard them talking about booking flights. He told them he was taking that leave as well and was heading somewhere and could drop them off. It was on his way. Fast forward to the day of leave, my friends are packed up ready to go, and the other sailor said he was ready to go and would meet them on the pier to take them to Ohio. I hung out with them on the pier, since we were close and I was off, but was leaving that day. 2 hours passed and they received a phone call that he was running a little late and would be there in an hour. 5 hours later, my friend said screw it and booked flights. Cost them around $300, $400 extra dollars, and being E3s, that was a lot of money. Scumbag finally met up with them and gave them a lengthy excuse on why he left them on the pier, and it was bull crap to say the least. My friends were pissed, and even though he didn't actually do anything wrong, he still screwed them over. I slept on the rack underneath the now scumbag, and already didn't like him. He wasn't very reliable and smelled kind of bad, which was a common occurrence when you lived in close quarters, but it could give people a negative stigma about you. One day, out to sea, I got tired of his smell and was still pretty perturbed about what he did to my friends, so I decided to switch his sock out with one of mine. Only my sock wasn't used for my feet. It was used for my alone time. I waited until he fell asleep and took his shoe, then shook his old sock out. He reused his socks. I slid my 3-day used crusty Giz sock into his shoe and set my alarm for when he got up. He then woke up, used the bathroom, and got ready for watch. He took his shoe down, pulled the sock out, noticed something was weird, peeled the sock open and brought it to his mouth. Nose to smell, it literally touched his lips. Then put the sock on and went to stand his 12-hour watch. I waited a long time to tell my friends, as I didn't want anyone finding that out. But once that guy went UA, unauthorized absence, and never returned, I told my friends, and they were pretty happy with my decision. Story 35. So this is pretty messed up, but here it goes. Once lived in an apartment with my best friend, not a real nice place, but the price was right. So our neighbor on one side was a middle-aged lady with 2 sons, let's say 13 and 16 years old. These boys were all gothic out and kind of weird, but they seemed to be good kids. They were always outside sitting on our shared steps. After we had been there for a while, we figured out why. Their mother was absolutely terrible to these boys. Through our thin walls, we could hear the daily verbal abuse, constant yelling, and name-calling. As a result, we hated this lady. She was a terrible person. We would occasionally let the boys come in and play video games or hang out for a few minutes if it was raining or cold, so they didn't have to go home. Anyway, one night my friend and I get pissed drunk and somehow find a freshly dead groundhog. This evil lady's car happened to be unlocked. It was some crafty 80s 4-door. We gutted this dead groundhog and shoved it under her driver's seat. It was like the middle of summer. You can imagine the stench that must have come from that car. So the car did not move for 3 or 4 days. Then one day it is gone and we never saw it again. We didn't put much thought into our drunken plan, and unfortunately, a few days later, we heard the lady blaming one of the kids for the car. She didn't say a lot about it, and of course the kids didn't know a thing about it. This was years ago, and I'm not proud of what we did, but that's not to say that evil Git didn't deserve it. Story 36. Well, for the entirety of high school, I lived with my aunt and uncle because my parents wanted to make sure I got a good education. There was one day in high school that I was super cold. I didn't have a clean hoodie to wear. So I borrowed my cousin. I had second period with my cousin's younger brother, and he looks at me and nods in disappointment. You know you shouldn't be wearing that, right? I explained that I was in a hurry, and if it was such an issue, I'd wash the hoodie and put it back. He shrugs his shoulders. Later in the day, I'm getting off the bus, and my cousin calls me from DC, where he's going to college. He chews me out for an hour over this hoodie. He said some pretty nasty crap, so I retaliated. I said, at least I don't have to worry about my brothers doing substances. Super petty in hindsight. I wish I hadn't had said that because crap hits the fan from here. His younger brother, the one that ratted me out, had just started smoking. My family is super anti-substances, so that was a huge issue. DC cousin tells his parents chewed younger bro and me out and force us to take substances tests. Before taking his test, younger bro rats me out for drinking alcohol before prom. I passed, he failed. The family is crying, and there was a clear divide between my cousin's family and me. I was literally told that I broke the family apart, and I got berated some more. He ends up getting sent to Valley Forge, and my aunt. Uncle said, "You're lucky you're going to college. It will straighten you out." I drank more alcohol, smoked over those 5 years than ever before, but I did end up getting straightened out. I drink socially and don't smoke anymore because I'm finishing my master's in a health profession. I actively avoided going to their house for any family events for 7 years. Had I simply just taken the ass whooping and not said anything about him doing substances, it would have been a minor inconvenience that would have gone away. But sometimes you don't think of this crap when you're 17. It was petty, and it backfired. Story 37. My dad had an old truck parked on the back of our property that some kept stealing small parts from, cap, rotor, points, etc. We wired it to an electric fence power supply. One evening, we heard a bunch of yelling and swearing and went back there, and the guy left us some free tools. Story 38. This hasn't happened yet. It should commence in roughly 3 hours. My current job is not all that great, small company cronies and all that. But what makes it truly crap is the management and ownership attitude. We are treated like throwaway items, not people. We've had a fair amount of people let go recently, most of them for cost-cutting reasons. When some of these terminated employees pointed out that the holiday season is a crafty time for planned reduction, they literally got told, "Not my problem, that's your problem." When we are forced to perform jobs without adequate equipment, funds, parts, etc. Not my problem, make it work. Lie to the customer if you need to. It's your issue, not mine. I'm the last surviving member of my department. I'm doing the jobs of 3 people just to keep operations running. I'm by no means vital to company survival, but there will be pain if my workshop sits idle. I'm turning in my final timesheet today, without notice. My new job starts next week. I think it's petty revenge, but that's okay. Not my problem, right? For those asking, I worked my whole shift instead of leaving an hour early. While I don't like my employer, I liked my fellow employees. So I made sure the person most likely to be forced to fill in for me was set up as best as I could manage. One manager had a definite, "Oh, damn," look as I told him, but he was the only decent manager we have. He even wished me luck. The other didn't seem to give a damn, and promptly ignored me until I left the office after I turned in my company gear. No goodbye, no reaction, just went back to tapping on the phone like I wasn't there. While I'm happy to be rid of such a soul-crushing job, I will miss a fair number of my coworkers. They are great people stuck in a crap job, but I'm going to enjoy an extended weekend before starting the new gig. Better pay, better benefits, and I will be able to see some new places. Story 39. 2 instances. 1. As a young kid, like from age 4 until she disappeared with some random HVAC tech who apparently serviced her, as well as our actual furnace on a repair call, my stepmother would make me wait on her hand and foot. At first it was fun and I felt useful, but it became apparent that she was totally taking advantage of me, especially when my dad wasn't around. Take out the trash, clean not only your room, but the bathrooms and kitchen. It'd get me. Name the item. Fetch my cigarettes, get the lighter, etc. all the time. One of her regular requests was, "Get me a glass of water." Now, we lived in a sprawling ranch, single floor, house at the time, with the kitchen on one end and the Florida room, a type of living area with windows on all sides, sort of like an all-seasons room at the opposite end, and the stepmonster's favorite place to lounge. Well, it was a walk for anyone, let alone a barely 3-foot-tall little kid. And then, of course, she wanted her water quickly, so I'd double time it, spilling water all along the route in the process, and getting yelled at for that as well. About a third of the way to the kitchen was a powder room. It was around a corner and off a hallway not visible from the Florida room. So instead of going all the way to the kitchen, climbing a footstool to reach the tap, and carefully but quickly coming all the way back, I'd simply detour into the bath for water. It didn't matter that I couldn't reach the tap, and except for some mild, taste-questioning lip-smacking, she never found out I was dipping her glass in the toilet bowl to fill it. 2. My uncle was a prominent, busy doctor. My aunt, a stay-at-home mother of 2. My uncle was very rigid and authoritative and had to have things just so. A certain breakfast at a specific time every morning, his clothes folded or hung in a particular way, a specific drink waiting for him upon his return home, and a specific dinner at a given time every night based on a rotating menu. Pork chops, say, Monday, turkey, Tuesday, etc. This went on for decades until he eventually passed. Regardless, one night was meatloaf night, and after years of no complaints, my uncle erupts, screaming at my aunt that her meatloaf is simply garbage. How could she not be able to cook something so simple at all? And literally fires his full dinner plate across the room. My aunt, his submissive, quiet, loyal servant over their then 20 or so years of marriage, simply apologizes and cleans up, promising to improve her recipe. It was only after my uncle died, they were married for 52 years, that she admitted to my mother that she's fed him meatloaf and solely of Alpo, wet canned dog food, for the past 30 years, with nary a complaint. Story 40. Crossing at a busy downtown intersection, a very impatient driver waiting to make a turn honked at a lady pushing a stroller. She had the right of way. I slowed down, but the guy next to me straight up stopped in front of the car, then bent down to retie his shoelaces. Story 41. Mine is so good. My wife stayed up late binge-watching Narcos the other night and woke me up by being really loud when she came to bed. I couldn't get back to sleep and I was super irritated about it. I mean, just be quiet when you come to bed. You don't have to, this is Sparta, kick the door open, turn on both lamps in the overhead, and then Greg Louganis into bed. Anyway, I'm a commercial helicopter pilot and I had a 6 a.m. flight that morning. So I decided to take a short detour and flew a few laps right over our bedroom to wake her up. When I landed, I had a text from her, calling me a huge banana. Vindication feels pretty sweet, y'all. Sorry, neighbors. For those wanting proof, this is the best I can do without flying over your bedroom at 6 a.m. I'm glad everyone found my petty revenge to be as funny as I did. Story 42. Roommate in college was disgustingly messy and a raging git. When I had the flu once, I had left a blanket and sweatshirt in the living room to keep warm. Woke up to a text along the lines of, "You're a disgusting pig. The apartment is a disaster. Get all of your belongings out of the living area or we're going to have a problem." And honestly, if she had nicely asked, then fine. And if she weren't insanely messy, then fine. But she had to go full out git. She had forgotten that I had provided all of the furniture for our apartment. Couch, table, TV, etc. All my belonging. So, while she was in class, I called up some friends on the football team that occasionally helped people move for spare cash. We loaded up every single piece of furniture onto their truck and just parked it a few blocks away on the street. Cue my roommate coming home to an empty ducking apartment, screaming at me and calling me names. I just told her I was following her orders and I moved out all of my belongings. She was dumbfounded and really had nothing to say. Obviously brought the furniture back hours later, but certainly proved my point. TBH, that's only one of many petty points I had to make to that git. Story 43. When I was a senior in high school, I was in a group English project with 2 other people. We had to read the assigned book, and over the course of a month or so, we had several mini projects to do before the final presentation. These mini projects were designed so that each person would be covering a different section of the book, and they would all be combined for the finished product. The night before the first mini project was due, I learned that neither one of my group members planned on putting any more effort into the project than spark notes and bullcrap. I ended up pulling several all-nighters, trying to just get a passing grade. Fast forward to the day of our final presentation. We were going to be the last group to present, putting us after the lunch break in the middle of class. What I hadn't told anyone was that I was going to the blood drive that our school was having during lunch to donate. I go, donate, and spend a couple minutes, making sure I'm not going to pass out afterwards. I come back to the classroom and find my group halfway through the prezi I had made for the presentation. Apparently, they had been floundering, making crap up on the fly, and making it very clear to everyone that they had never read the book or had any idea what the duck was going on. Teacher has her head in her hands. I walk back in and my group says, "Oh, thank God he's back." I restart the prezi, give the presentation, and took my seat. Explain what happened to the teacher after classes. Got a passing grade, 90% sure they failed. Story 44. Once upon a time, I was a newly married lad. We purchased my grandparents' house from their estate as our first home. We didn't have kids yet, so we both had full-time jobs and hectic schedules. Incident the first. One day I came home from work to find my dog out on her run going nuts. She rarely barked, so I paused for a second, trying to find out what was going on, and watched as a bright yellow sprinkler came flying over the fence. there was a bunch of stuff lying about my backyard, where the neighbor kid, let's call him Evil Son, had been throwing it at my poor dog. I walked next door and get sex on the neighbor's door. The boy's mother, let's call her Git, came to the upstairs window, not even to the door, and yelled, "What are you doing on my property?" at me. By the way, this is my very first interaction with this woman. I introduced myself and tried to explain what was going on. She immediately jumped to, "Do you have video of my son throwing stuff?" Then, inexplicably, Git started blaming my wife and I. If we weren't such hermits, everyone wouldn't hate us so much. Odd, all of my other neighbors waved when we went by, but we didn't interact more than that. She was the only one I didn't know. "Anyhow," she went on, and it turned out that she was upset that I didn't tell her that my grandmother had passed. Yeah, I hadn't told someone I didn't know about a family matter. Fine, whatever. I dropped the matter and left. Incident the second. Shortly thereafter, I stopped working a regular 9 to 5 and started my own business, working out of my home. I noticed some mail went missing. One day, I see the mail truck go by and put on shoes to go pick it up from the mailbox. When I get down there, I find the box empty and get walking away from it with my crap in hand. I yell at her and she drops it in a pile on her driveway. Proceeds to yell at me that it was blowing around her driveway and that I should be more careful. Yeah, so I call the cops. They are reticent to do anything since I didn't actually see her take the mail from my mailbox, but they still go over to talk to her. I can hear her yelling at them from inside my house. The next day, she runs out and stands in front of my car, trying to confront me as I'm leaving. I tell her in no uncertain terms that I am okay with running her over. Incident the third. A neighbor's pet bunny went missing from its outdoor hutch. Another neighbor spots Idiot down at the end of our cul-de-sac, looking suspicious. Bunny is found, strangled, and mutilated where Evil Son was seen. Cops are called. Denials. The works. Incident the fourth. We were getting our house ready to sell. Part of that included stripping and repainting our attached deck. I come home from work, and fine. A can of paint has been opened and thrown across the deck, some furniture, and the side of the house. There are a few child-sized footprints through the paint. Cops come, but don't give a duck. Incident the fifth. Evil Son is expelled from his elementary school. He was found with a hit list containing most of his classmates. This was not long after Columbine and similar incidents, so folks were sensitive about stuff like that. Incident the sixth. Git has an extinction burst, as they call it, blaming everyone for everything bad in her life. She puts flyers in everyone's mailboxes talking about a conspiracy against her. Did you know that that's actually illegal and punishable by fine? She does now. Incident the seventh. Git takes a different neighbor to task, out in the street. Turns out she doesn't have any friends anymore. Other neighbors join the fracas, ganging up on her. Turns out her kid hit their rabbit, or her kid throwing rocks at their cars, and various other events made her no friends. Incident the eighth. Git gets kicked out of a city alderman meeting, where she tried to have the entire neighborhood condemned for various imagined slights. Results. So, after years of dealing with this woman's bullcrap, we prepared to move to a new house. We threw one last blowout party, as one does. I get a little inebriated and went on a rant about how little I was going to miss having that neighbor. A friend decided that payback was in order, so we went down into the cellar and perused my grandfather's shelves of stuff he never threw away. Amongst it all was a bottle of Substances Killer. Great Depression era, block letters, Substances Killer. I have no idea what was in that stuff. Now, this is where the story gets a little hazy. My friend disappeared for about an hour, and then was back, as if nothing ever happened. I never saw the bottle leave the shelf, but a few days later, parts of a Git's lawn started to turn brown and pass. Big block letters spelled out, "I am a Git." I ran into Git a week later, as I was getting my mail. Contractors were tearing up her lawn, laying down rolls of sod. She stomped over to me and gitted about my other neighbor's kids. She clearly saw them apply lighter fluid to her lawn and light it on fire to burn the awful message into it. Funny thing, whatever was done to her lawn, within a week, sections of the new sod died, and the message reappeared, although blobby and illegible. And I still have that yellow sprinkler. Duck that Git. Story 45. This was petty revenge executed on me by a friend. Executed flawlessly. At some point back in the late 90s, early 2000s, my friends and I started trolling each other by sending each other links to what were supposed to be legit pictures, and normally of each other hanging out, something cool, etc. But were actually pictures of plant stands. It got so bad that we started refusing to click links sent around, and coined the phrase, "Don't plant stand me." Flares up and down for several years, as my friends move away from NYC and around the country, but continue to share pictures, funny links, etc. We would also keep track of who had gotten who most recently, and I don't even remember what I'd done, but I'd plant standed one of them particularly badly. Fast forward about a year, I'm getting married. Everyone is invited, including this friend who's going to stay at my place during the wedding. She drives up in a rental and asks me to help bring her bags in. I'm so excited to see her. I rush out and grab a couple and carry them into the guest room and get her all set up. It's a great wedding, and my wife and I head off to our honeymoon for a week, saying goodbye to everyone before we go. When I get back to my house, another week or so goes by before I have to get something from the closet in the guest room. And that's when I find it. A huge wrought iron plant stand smack in the middle of the room. This friend of mine found, bought, disassembled, flew to another country, reassembled, and left a plant stand in my guest room. And I helped carry it into my own damn house. Needless to say, she won. We don't plant stand anymore. There's no point. Story 46. I used to work at a pizzeria. There was this one customer that everyone hated. She was rude as hell, complained about everything, every single order she ever received. She found something to complain about. And she wasn't a normal customer. No, she would order essentially groceries from us by ordering disassembled sandwiches. For example, she'd order a chicken sandwich, but with all of the ingredients separate and in particular amounts, with cutlery, butter, a side of grated cheese, 3 plates, oil and vinegar on the side, medium rare toasted bread, whatever the duck that means, extra packets of ranch, you get the idea. But because it was all technically part of a sandwich, she didn't expect to be charged for any of the extras and would complain. She also refused to answer the door when delivery drivers got there, and instead would leave the money in an envelope, exact change, no tip, under the doormat, and wanted the driver to leave the food on her doorstep. She also had weird specifications about where the driver could park. Never in her driveway, only on the street, even when it was raining or she'd complain. Also, she didn't want them to announce their arrival in any way. No knocking, no ringing the bell, no beeping their car horn. They needed to be silent or she'd complain. Ducking nightmare. This woman. And every time she complained, she'd try to weasel some free crap out of us for next time. Because of ducking course she would. Anyway, one day she says she needs the driver to make change. And she wants him to just leave the change in the envelope and not take a tip because he gets paid already. So I tell my driver this and he says, "Oh, I get paid, do I? No problem. I'll take care of it." He goes on the delivery and comes back pleased as punch. Doesn't say a word about how he took care of it. I get distracted, keep working. 10 minutes later, I get a phone call. It's the crazy lady and she's furious because apparently my driver left her the correct change of $5.85 in the envelope like she asked, in pennies. Ducking genius. I had to put her on hold so I could laugh. I get back on the phone with her and I said, "Ma'am, I think you'll find that pennies are legal tender. There's nothing I can do." After explaining that I am, indeed, the manager and the highest authority present, she got fed up and hung up on me. That driver is still a ducking king to me. Story 47. I'm significantly older than my siblings. In his junior year, my younger brother had a girl who wouldn't leave him alone. After he rejected her, she started to show up once a week to leave creepy passion plays in chalk on our driveways. After that, my brother still didn't communicate with her. So she started to tap our house while she was drawing her stick figures on our driveway. So my brother came to me and asked what we could do to get back at he. He wanted to wait outside with airsoft guns, pull the caps off of their tires at school. Because I'm an adult and could get in quite a lot of trouble for harassing, I did the next best thing. I called her school and got her barred from prom. Story 48. Had an ex-roommate whose girlfriend over time just started living at our house and refused to chip in on rent and utilities, even after multiple conversations about how it would be more beneficial to split things between us all. There were 3 of us living there before she started being a leech. Each month, the utility bills went up, which really pissed me off because they were in my name. The house had 1 garage, but a double-wide driveway. My roommates and I had it planned out who parked where, according to who left for work at such and such times. The GF started parking in my space, leaving me to park in the street and throwing off the parking arrangements. She also ruined a few pots and pans my mother had given to me by using metal utensils and then leaving them in the sink to get rusty. After a while, she stopped socializing and sequestered herself in his room all the time, and we got mice because she was keeping food in the bedroom. The thing that really pushed me over the edge, though, was when I discovered she had been using my cosmetics when she had her own. Ended up getting pink eye because she just wouldn't stop using my makeup, even after I removed it all from the bathroom. My petty revenge was pissing in her shampoo, not a little squirt either. I made sure to get nice and dehydrated and filled a solo cup, then poured it into her bulk-sized shampoo bottle and shook it up. This happened years ago and it still gets me riled up like nothing else. No regrets. Story 49. Girlfriend had an iPod for like 3 years. It gets remotely locked one day, and she starts getting messages saying it was stolen. Turns out, she bought it from a guy who got it from a girl who sold it for substances. Will this girl's dad comes back from deployment and freaks out, threatening my then 17-year-old girlfriend for stealing this iPod. Now my Jeff would have been totally cool with returning it for her money back, but this guy is seriously irate, threatening showing up at her house and everything, the address to which he got by using his Apple account because the iPod was still under his account. He's acting way overly abusive, and my GF honestly feared for her safety. Because this guy was so intense, This went on for about a week before he really stated scaring her. So my GF does some digging and finds out how the iPod eventually ended up in her hands. So they agree that my girlfriend will leave it at a Walmart customer service desk, and he will come pick it up later. What he picked up was an envelope with an iPod case and a letter in it. The letter telling him the actual iPod was out in the parking lot, beneath a car, and that he should find it before it's run over. The iPod was in fact already destroyed and placed behind the tire of a SUV in the Bob Evans next door. Story 50. Sharing a holiday home with some friends and their 10-year-old son started to be a pain. Not helping around the house and crying if he didn't get his way, his parents decided to just let him sit and watch YouTube on his iPad instead of disciplining him. So I logged into the internet router and would use admin privileges to suspend his device from accessing the internet. As soon as he got up to ask his dad for help, I would reactivate the device so it seemed as if nothing was wrong. I did this every day for 2 weeks. Story 51. I was dating this girl. Thought she was the one. So I gave her the keys to my apartment. I worked late for my job. I was just happy there was someone in my bed. When I got home at 2 a.m, came home one night and she was awake. She confessed to using my apartment to cheat on me with 7 different people. So I packed her stuff up. She was still living with her mom anyways. So I lied to her and said I moved to Seattle. I moved to Hawaii instead. 3 months after being in Hawaii, I get a phone call from her. I answer, and to my surprise, she's called me from the Seattle airport. She flew out there to try and fix things between us. The dialogue goes as follows. Me. So you're in Seattle? Her. Yeah. Weren't you listening? I came here to fix us. Me. Oh, well that's bad. Her. What's bad? Me. I'm in Hawaii. Then hung up the phone. Phone rings, I answer. Her. You lied to me. Me. Huh, how does it feel? I hang up again. I don't know if that's petty, but to me was a good revenge. Story 52. I used to be best friends with this girl. That whenever she met someone, she'd practically forget about me. Like she'd literally ignore me like I didn't exist. Anywho, we went together on a trip and met a group of girls. And she obviously chose them over me and hung out with them all day, acting like they all were best friends or something, but as soon as they weren't around anymore, she instantly started talking crap about them. One day she went to hang out with them as usual and she forgot some camera at our hotel room. She kept bragging about it because it was pretty expensive and had Wi-Fi. I don't know, who cares? And when I saw it on the bed, I decided to hide it somewhere. An important detail I forgot to mention is that we were sharing our room with 2 other girls we didn't know much. They seemed nice though, but she hated them and kept telling me that they were low class and looked like thieves or something. Pretty sure she was just mad because one of the first days we were trying swimsuits and I got complimented by them. She, on the other hand, got told that she looked weird because her legs were skinny but she had a big belly. Anywho, when she got back, she obviously realized her camera was gone and started freaking out. I pretended to help her look around for it, and just when I was about to tell her that I hid it as a joke, the other girls came in the room and she immediately turned around and started yelling at them. She kept screaming that she knew they were thieves from the very first moment she saw them, and that she wanted her camera back. Obviously, the other girls called her a snob and she stormed off. My best friend thanked me for staying with her, unlike her new friends who decided to go party instead of helping her look for camera, and hung out with me the rest of the trip. This happened like 6 years ago. Never ever told her the truth, not even when I stopped hanging out with her. Story 53. When me and my ex broke up, we were living together, but my name was not on the lease. I had paid for that month, and we agreed I would move out after that. I had known that our relationship was on its way out, so I wasn't all that torn up about the breakup at first. She went out of town until I moved out of the apartment. During that time, I kept hanging out with people I had met through her, which apparently infuriated her to the point. Every time I would go hang out with that group of people, I would receive a text saying, "Did you have fun with blah and blah?" This progressed to her telling me that I wasn't allowed to hang out with those people, and that if I was going to hang out with her friends, I had to at least respond to all her text messages. I would only respond if it was about our place. This went on for about 2 weeks until she found out I had started to hang out with another girl that went to her school. And she told me that regardless of the fact I had paid for the month, I had a week to get out of the apartment. I protested, but lost that argument to her counter-argument of, "She broke girl code, you hurt me, contracts change." When it finally came time for me to move out and her to come to town, I decided to be petty and take the toilet paper rolls out of the bathroom and made sure to not leave any at the house for her and her family. Story 54. When my brother Doug was 12, he'd cycle to local supermarket with his buddies to shoplift chocolate bars on Saturday. This went on for a month until they were hauled in by security. The stockroom manager, Bob, was married to our cousin, and recognizing my bro volunteered to bring him home. On ride home, my bro was seriously pleading with Bob not to tell my parents what had happened. He'd never do it again, and he'd pay for the chocolate. He'd learned his lesson, yada yada. Bob drops my bro off and tells my mom everything. This was in mid-October. My bro got grounded for 6 weeks. Christmas rolls around and we're in my aunt's house for extended family get-together. Mom gives Doug the presents to hand out. Doug says, Auntie Susan, thanks for hosting. Enjoy your gift. Cousin Kevin, awesome to see you. Here's your present. Then he comes to Bob and says, shouting, you really think you'll get a gift? Ducking rat gits don't get anything. Me and siblings almost wet ourselves laughing. Mom and Dad wildly embarrassed. Doug got grounded for another month. I used to turn my friend's cigarettes upside down in the pack. It worked because he would just put the pack to his mouth and pull a cigarette out with his lips, and then light it straight away. So he would end up lighting the filter on his cigarette, coughing wildly, and then tell me to go duck myself. Sometimes he would make the mistake multiple times in one night. Story 56. I mailed my crafty ex-best friend an envelope double stuffed with glitter and a note saying, I know what you did. I wasn't referring to anything in particular, but she lies about practically everything, so it was enough to mess with her for a while. Story 57. Every year I go away for 2 to 3 weeks to work in a different location. One summer when I rotated through my usual supervisor, took some time off. To cover the 3 weeks, they brought in a person from outside of our group to supervise. I was working my ass off, doing my work and what should have been the supervisor's work. We were set up in a temporary office with no connections to the outside world. We had plenty of work to keep us quite busy, though. The supervisor's day consisted of playing solitaire all day on the computer and then yell for an hour at the end of every day that work wasn't getting done fast enough. 2.5 weeks in, and I had enough. I deleted the shortcut for solitaire off of her desktop. Pandemonium breaks out. She lost her ducking mind. I had to swear that I did not delete any programs from her computer, which was completely accurate. I watched her over the next few days. I was there, do any and everything, to get a connection so she could download Solitaire. She even tried to get AOL working on the machine so she could dial up and get it. Story 58. My uncle took revenge on the FedEx guy that regularly picks up deliveries from his stoneworking business. He produces things like headstones, address stones, name brick, etc. Single order address stone are blocks of limestone. Usually we individually box stones, load them onto a pallet, and bring it to the back of the FedEx truck with a forklift. The delivery man just slides the boxes into his truck. One day, FedEx showed up early and grumpy and took off in a bit of a fit before we could finish boxing all of the stones. We missed delivery dates, and my uncle was pissed about it. Before FedEx showed up the next day, always the same guy, my uncle flipped open whatever a forklift's equivalent its hood is and told us to act like the lift was broken. He also told us not to help the delivery man load boxes. I can't remember how many boxed stones the guy had to deal with, but I know that by the time he was done lugging stones across the warehouse and into his truck, he was out of breath and drenched in sweat. Story 59. I currently work as a barista at Starbucks, and overall it's a good job, but the pay is just okay. One thing I really dislike, though, is when a group of young junior high kids will come in and order what feels like 1 million frappuccinos. So my buddy told me about a guy who puts the name sticker for the order over the Starbucks logo in order to ruin their Snapchat and Instagram pictures. Last shift, I tried it out for myself, and it was like substances in terms of extreme pleasure, and as a bonus, no raging addiction. The look on this one kid's face when they saw their drink, knew they couldn't take a good photo of it, but also knew that the only real problem was the sticker placement, priceless. Story 60. My roommate in college had only child syndrome and taped a piece of paper over her clock because she didn't want to share it with me. Never mind that she couldn't see the clock herself, but she would rather no one see the clock than share the clock with my eyes. So, from then on, I would steal one sock from a set once a week. It was slow enough that she didn't realize it was me sabotaging her socks, but fast enough for her to be really annoyed and wondering that the hell was happening to all of her matching socks. Story 61. I'm proud of it. My ex many moons ago was a ducking idiot. She knew that I had many friends that lived in the same neighborhood as her ex, that she had left a couple months before dating me. She always told me she was going over to Jeff's house to study, and I had no reason not to believe her. Till one day, she wouldn't answer a single text. Now, I'm not the kind of guy to text 1 billion times. I'll text you, then if you don't reply, maybe I'll text you 3 hours later to make sure you got my last message. And if you still don't answer, then, I'll talk to you when you feel like you want to talk. So, anyway, I'm at my friend's house, later that night, having not gotten a reply from her since maybe 12 hours ago. Me and the group of friends decide to go outside in his backyard to make a pit fire when I notice her car in the driveway of the house behind us. I didn't know it was her ex's house, but it was the way wrong neighborhood for her girlfriend's house. I call her sister up and say, "Where is your sister?" And she says, "Oh, she's at girl's name's house." Well, I'm going ducking nuts then because I'm looking at her car now, and this isn't girl's name's neighborhood. Her response to that was, So I hang up and ask my friend who lives in the house we were all hanging out at, who owns the house behind him. Oh, that's her ex-BF's name's house. I called her phone to find it was off. So I just chilled the rest of my time there and pay it no more attention. No sense in worrying at this point. It's a done deal. About 2 hours later, I get a call from her saying the phone was on silent for study purposes and if I wanted to come over. Sure, I told her. I arrive at the house a little bit after, and she hops in the car. And as soon as she shuts the door, I ask, "How is studying with girlfriend's name?" And she gives me some bullcrap answer like I didn't know. After she's done spewing her lie, I say, "Weird. Must have been a long walk from ex-BF's house." I made sure to look at her face as I said it so that I could see any expression. She knew I knew, but wouldn't let it go. "It will go quicker if I just give you the dialogue. We were just talking things out. Why would it be okay to just go over there to do that if you have a boyfriend? Talk things out? What needs to be talked out? We've been friends for a very long time before dating. I can't just stop talking to him. So to get around that, you feel it's logical to lie to me about going to girlfriend's house? It's 11 p.m. You've been talking it out since 10 a.m. I've tried getting a hold of you a couple times too." Silence for a bit. "So, what did you guys do?" She wouldn't answer or look at me. I told her to get out of the car and just pulled off. She broke up with him the first time because he was physically abusive. And about a year after I drove off, she calls me asking if we could try to make it work again and if I'd like to get together over dinner. So I said yes and arranged a date, a fairly upscale place for Saturday at 8 p.m. Told her the dress code and all, since it was a snazzy joint. I'm not sure how long she sat there because I didn't duck and go. Story 62. Saw a lady with her purse on top of her car at a stop sign. Rolled down my window to tell her. She interrupted me by saying, "Leave me alone. I can play my music as loud as I effing want." Even with my window down, I couldn't hear her music. Story 63. Me and a few workmates were at an Italian restaurant for a leaving party when I had to go toilet. Came back and carried on eating my pizza. Turns out one of my colleagues poured the chili oil all over my pizza, and that crap set my mouth on fire. Plus, I'm not a big fan of heat anyways, so I basically had to write off a slice of pizza. Anyways, the guy that did it found it hilarious, and since he covered his food in the same oil, I figured he'd have oily fingers from the bottle. "You've got something in the corner of your eye, Callum?" His left eye went completely red and didn't stop watering for about 15 minutes. Story 64. Construction worker. Was working a job on an island. At the end of the day, I'd go fishing for an hour or so. Well, one day I found this 3-foot gare dried up on the shore. I thought it'd be funny to hide it in one of the crew's vans. It took them a while to find the smell, and everyone got their laugh. Some, how it got out that I did it. A few days later, I opened my travel bag, we were working out of town, and this dead gare is staring back at me. Duck. My foreman is in tears. I started laughing too. He told me who did it. I put the gare into his travel bag before the 4-hour ride home. It took him a few weeks to get over it. Story 65. Had a girl who would constantly try to ruin my reputation at school by saying I was an escort behind my back while I thought we were friends. I just cut her out and let her talk smack until one day I snapped because she invited my long-term BF, a little less than 2 years, over to her house while him and I were in a petty argument. I ducking lost it. Told the boy to go duck himself and all that, then cut him out of my life. Keep in mind, she had been feeding him lies about me, causing us to fight. A few months later, I remembered that she was deeply in love with this guy named Jack. Not his real name, you know. She would always talk about him and say how he was the one, yada yada. I somehow remembered his Instagram name and decided to follow him and like a few pics to see if he'd DM me. Sure enough, he did, and we met later that day. A few weeks later, we decided to make it official and go on a formal date, then post our announcement on Facebook. Oh boy, how this girl had a ducking mental breakdown, threatening to end her life and all that. Did I care? Duck, no. Karma's a get, and she deserved it. We're about to make 6 months in December, and I couldn't be happier. I'm glad I made that petty decision because it opened a window to a beautiful opportunity. Story 66. Used to work with people who were tech illiterate, and one woman talked on her personal cell all day, while me and a coworker on her time did all the work. We talked to all the bosses, etc., and nothing was going to happen. She was in the in crowd. So one day I turned off her middle monitor, we used 3, just so it'd be blank and that'd show her. 11-hour days are rough with someone who could help, but was too lazy. I wanted a petty victory. The next day, crap you not 4 people were at her desk trying to get it to work. She started an hour before me. I chuckled and took my seat and got to work because it needed to get done by lunch. I finish our presentation, get it all set up before lunch, and they are still at her desk. It's been 6 hours at this point. I figure there must be something big they are doing. I'll help. I walk over and the middle monitor is still off, and they are talking with our in-house department. And we're at the point they replaced the cord, and we're going to order a new monitor. At this point, I asked if it's turned on. They look at each, then at me. Of course it is, which is when I reach over and turn on the monitor and boom, it turns on and displays correctly. I was so disappointed, proud, but disappointed. TL.ER. I turned off a coworker's monitor and they couldn't fix it for 6 hours until I turned it back on. Story 67. I was working as a retail sales rep for Comcast. One day, This guy and his wife comes in requesting to switch service to her name so they can get better pricing. I look up the location, and they've been switching back and forth for the past 6 years. Not a problem. As a rep, I'm not allowed to explicitly tell customers to do this, but if they ask, I can't deny them, so I go over the procedure with him. In order to do the switch, the old account has to be closed clean. That means the equipment needs to be returned and the final balance paid. Normally, I'll let the equipment slide as long as they return it within a week, but the final bill needs to be paid before the switch. There's no exceptions. He throws a fit. The bill's about $200, but he's disputing half of it. I'll pay you $100 and that's it. Yeah, no. This is not a negotiation. $200 or no switch. You can dispute the transaction later. I explain to him that this is our policy for account switches, and if I do what he's asking, I'll get in a lot of trouble. I outright tell him, "You're asking me to do something that will get me fired." He doesn't care. He insists I take the $100. Finally, after 15 minutes more of wasting my time, he gives up and yells, "Fine, I'll call in and put it under my son Robert's name." The moment he leaves, I notate his account. Customer wants new account in son Robert's name. Refuses to pay final bill. Do not restart service until bill paid in full and equipment returned. Dude came back a few days later, tail between his legs, with a bunch of DVRs, the old heavy ones, and paid the bill in full to restart service. Story 68. Delivered pizzas about a week for my best friend's shop. Warned me about a few customers, but one in particular was always rude to the drivers and never tipped. Lucky for me, I got to deliver his order of a single Cowzone, maybe $7 total, and he tried to pay with a $50 bill. All the menus in the website prominently said nothing over a $20 bill for deliveries, and he'd been their customer long enough to know that. But when I told him this while explaining how I didn't have enough change, he got extremely rude and was loud about how it's not his fault and that drivers should always carry enough money on them. So I did what any person in that situation should do and told him not to worry about it, and I'd pay for the order. For those few seconds, he thought he'd won a free Cowzone by being an idiot, until I pulled it out and started eating it as I walked back to my car. Of course he miffed me the whole time I was walking, but damn if that wasn't the best tasting Cowzone ever. Story 69. College 2-story apartment. One girl above us was a smoker and had no ashtray. Instead, she just let her cigarette butts fall between the cracks in the wooden platform down to our level, usually right on our doormat. I started picking them up and putting them on her doormat. Git had the nerve to gripe about me doing that. I told her I wouldn't do it if I didn't find them on my damn doormat. She stopped, and then she started again. My roommate dated her roommate, and I learned this girl had herpes. So the smoker started receiving a crap ton of Valtrex brochures and other free literature. Story 70. Someone said mean words about me on Snapchat. I wasn't too fazed, but my sister decided to tell the school about the substances in the girls' locker for probably the pettiest revenge I've ever witnessed. Story 71. I once was good friends with two women who were friends with each other. Call them Kate and Jane. Kate and I had a falling out with Jane. Over what, we don't know. She suddenly became antisocial, cruel, and vicious. The evening of the big fallout, we all had agreed to hang out late in the evening. I go to Jane's apartment and knock. No answer. Kate shows up. I tell her Jane isn't answering the door. She says, "She's eobably got those damn headphones on again. I'll knock on the window." So she does. Jane comes to the door screaming at us. Why did we wake her up? Did we know what time it was? How hard it was for her to sleep? We were shocked. We reminded her we'd all agreed to meet at 11. I'd spoken to her not 3 hours before, and she said she was excited. She kept berating us. We finally told her it was fine if she didn't want to hang out with us, but she should have sent us a text or something when she changed her mind, and we wouldn't have bothered her, and she should go back inside. Kate and I went across the courtyard to my apartment. Jane and I are neighbors, and sat outside drinking and smoking and talking. Much of the talk centered around how much Jane had changed, how rude and mean she'd been, and how we were sick of her crap and having to constantly maneuver around her. So she decided to pop a squat outside. But being drunk and still pissed at Jane, she also decided to take her revenge. She walked across the courtyard, yanked down her pants, and pissed all over Jane's welcome mat, stoop, and door, laughing hysterically the whole time. I just sat there, dumbfounded. Kate pulled her pants up and said, "That's what I think of her now." The Uber came, she left, and it was never mentioned again. Story 72. Northern United States. Snow on the ground. The dead of winter. Coworker at the local shop is a consistent jackass. Said coworker also goes out for frequent smoke breaks and, rather than standing in the cold outside the back door, likes to sit in their car. So one day, a different coworker of mine comes into the shop with a cardboard box in their hands and a gigantic grin on their face. Long story short, they have purchased 2 pounds. Now think about this, 2 pounds of glitter. It came in several small, clear plastic bags, all within the cardboard box they were carrying. I'm sure I'm just remembering it this way, but I swear at one point somebody said, "I have a plan." Said coworker with the gigantic grin manages to slip outside into the parking lot during the shift. They come back with an empty box. Fast forward to lunchtime. Said jackass coworker goes out to their car for a smoke. It hasn't been snowing, but it's cold enough that you can see your breath. So they getting in their car, and as the door closes, the engine comes to life. At my other coworker's insistence, several of us have gathered by the break room window to observe this occasion. What happened next I can only describe as a literally screaming snow globe. The howling that came out of that car, as all of the glitter came shooting out of the dashboard air vents, were filled with surprise, panic, denial, and eventually anger. For about 3 seconds, the front windshield of their car looked very similar to the effect of stirring metallic paint, only vertical and multicolored. Years, no exaggeration, no bees. Years later, they would come into the shop and, I am told, as I no longer work there, from time to time you can see a piece of glitter stuck to their backside, or their hair, their hands, their boots, pretty much anything that would have come in contact with the interior of that car. Several of my friends still will not let said coworker drive them anywhere, as they're afraid to get fairy herpes from the car. Hopefully, someone gets to enjoy this story. I went to a huge Oktoberfest celebration, and as is tradition, there wasn't enough outhouses for the size of the crowd, many lines being 10 to 15 people long. Well, as we all know, hours of drinking means it's all got to go somewhere. So a couple people in my group all go and stand in line in the same time. Lines are moving decently well, but lines of 10 to 15 people with a full bladder is still a long time, no matter how many times you hop up and down. Well, we get to the point where we are almost next, and this one girl, you know, the kind that is just hot enough to get by on her looks, but not hot enough to really make money off her looks, starts kind of doing this cutesy walk-up, sideways perpendicular to the lines. She tries flirting with the guy in front of us, who promptly told her the back of the line was way over there. She gets all pissy and complains to her boyfriend, who had walked up. One of the outhouses opens up. She dashes in, saying, "Sorry, not sorry." Well, there was an anger built up from the discomfort of a full bladder and waiting 20 minutes for some girl to just cut and expecting special treatment. So my buddies and I started chanting, what a get," at the top of our lungs. A decent amount of other people who saw what happened joined in until she exited the outhouse, where there were quite a bunch of duck yous exchanged back and forth. Well, her boyfriend keeps trying to encourage her to leave and let it be, since the angry drunk crowd was starting to turn, and he didn't want to get dragged into where he was going to have to defend her, but she refused to let it go. That was until she got struck by a sopping wet ball of paper towels or toilet paper that came from the direction of the outhouses. Everyone was pretty shocked as she let out a blood-curdling scream over it. I actually felt bad for her for a few seconds. We were all pissed for being forced to wait, but I didn't think it warranted a presumably piss-soaked ball of paper towels to the head. Story 74. I let me sister move in with me a few years back. It was getting to be fall and getting a bit chilly out, and she kept turning the furnace on without asking anyone. We always took it to a house vote to make sure everyone was on the same page. About 5 of us lived there at the time. Well, I warned her multiple times to stop or I would make her mad, and she kept turning it on. So I waited until it got down to about freezing one night. She told me in the morning we needed to get the furnace fixed, and I told her it was working just fine. She got pissed. I got phone calls from mom and dad shortly after. My sister moved out about 3 weeks later. Story 75. The poo hat. Found a hat in the car that I share with my ex that belonged to the girl, also ex-friend of mine, that he had been banging for the last 2 years of our marriage. I dipped a Q-tip in my dog's freshly laid poo and delicately lined the inside rim of her hat with it. Then gently placed hat on back seat of car where I found it. Returned car to ex the following day. Next time I borrowed the car, the poo hat was not there. Only regret is that I don't have a picture of her wearing it. Story 76. My husband just pissed me off, so I decided to unplug his phone that he thought was charging. I unplugged it from the wall so he wouldn't think I unplugged his for mine, then took mine when it was done. Now it just looks like he forgot to check the other end to make sure it's plugged in. Story 77. My parents were in a check-in queue for their flight, and the lady in front of them was giving the blackmail steward a really hard time, being rude, racist, etc. He calmly took it without any kind of comeback and wished her a nice day. When my parents finally got up to the desk, my mom asked him how he put up with people like that. He just smiled and said, "Well, she's going to Rome, but her luggage is going to Paris." Story 78. A few years ago, I was on a stag weekend and was sharing a room with my mate. I know what he's like, so I was pretty suspicious of all of my belongings. The first morning, after many beers the night before, so didn't remember to brush my teeth before passing out. I went to brush my teeth. I inspect my toothbrush. It's got some dark curly hairs embedded in it. Not loads to be obvious, but definitely some that shouldn't be there. It also had a tinge of brown to the bristles. I knew exactly what he'd done. So I chucked that toothbrush into the bin and grabbed his and repeated the favor by giving my hole a good scrub, then clean the hairs off. I then brush my teeth as best I can using my finger and some toothpaste before exiting the bathroom. He didn't say anything, but the crap-eating smirk I saw on his face confirmed everything I needed it to. He's presumably been sat there the last few years, giggling away to himself at the thought of me brushing my mouth with his arsehole. Ever since, whilst in the meantime, I'm the one laughing. Story 79. I'm not sure if this is petty revenge or pro-revenge. Also, this one happened to me. In high school, there was a guy called Sandy that was a friend of someone in my circle of friends. I did not like this guy because he was kind of awkward, but he was tolerated by my other friends. This guy did not have a mean bone in his body, but he was so awkward that he made me uncomfortable, and I always treated him like crap. In university, I had to fly to a funeral. Someone very close to me had died, and the funeral was in her hometown. I was depressed and not thinking clearly and was pretty much on autopilot for a few weeks. So when I got back from the funeral, I was stuck at the airport with nobody to pick me up and no way to get back to school, which was a 2-hour drive away. I called everybody. On the way, we talked a little. He was the only person I knew, not family, not friends, that managed to say something that was a little comforting. Family and friends tried, but only Sandy had the words and feelings that made me feel a little better. When I was a teenager, I made the stupid decision of letting this kid. I knew borrow a good chunk of money. I had expected to be paid back the next day. He ignored my calls and texts, so I went to his workplace, where I also buy my coffee every day. After months of excuses about his house, mom, buddies, dogs, all having to do with him not having the money, I'd finally had enough. I went to a Family Dollar, bought a jar of peanut butter, stopped at a cafe next door to grab a plastic knife, and began exacting my revenge. I found his car behind his workplace. It was unlocked too. I spread peanut butter under all 4 door handles, inside and out, behind the window switches. He called me a little later on, asking if I had anything to do with all the sticky crap in his car. And I responded, asking if he had anything to do with that money I was owed. I got my moolah a couple days later. People who took revenge on their bully, what happened? I hate the term bully in this context, but a former man-child neighbor had issues understanding that it wasn't okay to throw his garbage in my yard or let his drunk friends piss on my house. When the county cops didn't do anything about numerous calls, I started bagging the garbage and throwing it on his porch. He escalated to putting rat poison in hot dogs and throwing them to my German Shepherd mix. I saw her convulsing and found 3 packages worth of hot dogs studded with pellets right along the fence. She pulled through, no worse for wear. Cops said I couldn't prove who did it. And finally, inside his air conditioner unit. About 3 days later, he had all the doors and windows open. The following week, he was having the carpet replaced throughout the house. Eventually, the guts rotted away and the smell faded. But I think he knew I did it because I never found trash in my yard again. Do not duck with my dogs. Story 2, that he was a stupid cat. That he died because my mom was too poor to take him to the vet and urging me to cry. Are you gonna cry? Are you gonna cry about it? Like a big baby cry over your stupid cat? Everyone's gonna see you cry. You're about to cry, aren't you? And so on. This wasn't even the meanest thing she did. And she was mean to everyone. One day in 6th grade, I'd had enough. She didn't even do anything truly awful. I was just like, duck Jennifer G, and decided to do something about her. I stole one of my mom's little index recipe cards and meticulously wrote, I stuff my bra, in big, bold letters. I stuffed that and a little gold safety pin in my jacket pocket. The next day, I carefully affixed this to the back of her pink members-only jacket just before first bell rang. She walked around with this damn note on all day, confused as to why people were laughing at her. She screamed and screamed when she found it, and she cried. Everyone saw her cry. Not really a bully so much, but I was working at my university in the Division of Student Life as a gay, and had worked myself into a great position where people trusted me and relied on my advice. One night at a big party at a local university bar, I had the craving for a cigarette. I asked this group of girls if they had one, and being one to not bum straight up, I offered a coupon I had for free McDonald's fries if someone would give me one. I was pissed off at this point and tried reasoning with her. Seriously, over one cigarette? She then called over a couple of guy friends and said that I was falsely accusing her of stealing from me, and her friends all backed her up. She looked me in the eyes and said, you shouldn't be so trusting. Fast forward to Monday, we had job interviews for the division, and I happened to be passing through replacing a computer. I also happened to see the same pink stripe and hair individual that had stolen the McDonald's coupon from me the week before in line. I went to the person conducting the interviews and told him that she was a thief and a liar. On my way out, I smiled and waved. She didn't recognize me. She didn't get the job, and the interviewer thanked me for my contribution to the interview process. I was in 4th grade and had been bullied by a kid named Rocky. Swear to God that was his name, who was in 6th grade. Anyway, he would trip me, knock books out of my hands, punch me, etc. One day out on the playground, He pushed me into the merry-go-round while it was spinning. I was rolled around inside it while people were trying to stop it. The whole time he's laughing at me. I get pulled out and I'm side up pretty good. Get taken to the office to get patched up. Teachers asked what happened. I told them I fell. Went back outside and saw him standing there with his buddies. I ran as fast as I could toward him and punched him as hard as I could in the face. Broke his nose and just stood there looking at him ready to fight. His buddies told him to leave me alone and I never got picked on again at school. Story 5. My buddy and I pulled a prank on a bully, Adam, during the last 2 weeks of high school. We were hanging out at home playing video games and Adam surprised us by stopping by under the guise of wanting to be friends, despite having picked on us for the better part of 4 years, and one time, stabbing me with a pencil. Within about 5 minutes, he was pressed with me to write his final assignment for him, a speech for debate class. At first, I said no. I mean, what is this, some comic book cliche? What will he demand next, my milk money too? But my buddy kept winking at me, putting the pressure on, and convinced me that we should do it. After some negotiation, we agreed to put together a speech for him, but only if Adam would pay us $25 and also pick up a rather elaborate dinner order from Wendy's for us to eat that night. He agreed. My buddy and I ate well that night, and we had a plan. What we actually gave Adam was a quickly and pretty poorly written and somewhat incendiary speech about the silliness of Martin Luther King Day and how, if America really wanted to celebrate a true hero, it would instead be Joe Namath Day. I'm serious. That's what we wrote. We honestly believed Adam would read this at home, realize he'd been had, and be forced to rewrite and memorize a new speech in the wee hours of the night. Except, it didn't go down that way. Imagine my surprise when Adam actually delivered that very speech in class the next day. He didn't have the memorization down. He kept referencing his papers, but he marched on, and the look on our teacher's face was just priceless. I think I peed my pants. I was giggling so hard. The other kids in the classroom were in shock. As I recall, the teacher made Adam stop his presentation. She told him to leave the classroom, and she yelled at him in the hallway. As far as I know, Adam never fessed up that he hadn't actually written that paper, and I'm still not quite sure he ever really figured out just how brilliantly he'd been played. Story 6. When I was about 7 years old, there was a girl on the bus who would pull my hair and pick on me. I would come home crying. My parents asked the driver to move our assigned seating, but they refused. My dad asked me how I could fix the problem. I responded, "How can I do anything if I'm not allowed to hit?" As was the rule. "Dad, you're not allowed to hit, but you're allowed to not get hit." He explained what I should do, and I did it. When the girl sat next to me, I should put my back against the wall, my feet on her thigh, and slide her off the seat. She fell, cried. I got in trouble, and the assigned seating was moved. Problem solved. Apologies for the formatting, as I am currently on mobile. Story 7. I told him if he told me to end my life one more time, I'd punch him in the face. He didn't believe me and told me to go end my life. I punched him in the face, broke his glasses, and give him a nosebleed, and he never spoke to me again. Story 8. In my secondary school, when you were about to leave, you'd wear your school uniform shirt on the last day, and people would sign it for you. There was also an option to wear your own clothes for the last few days. So this guy who was leaving came decked out in the best of 1980s sports fashion, wielding a permanent marker, and instead of signing the shirts of leavers, he went around scribbling on the shirts of kids who were younger. Now, bear in mind, we were pretty poor, and if I came home with my uniform in a mess, I'd get grief because we couldn't afford to replace it. He grabbed me and scribbled all over my shirt, and somehow, using his yet unknown Quicksilver powers, I grabbed the marker off him and managed to scribble not only all over his Sergio Get windbreaker, but all over his face and neck. He punched me in the tit. I'm a girl, but it was worth it. Story 9. Well, my revenge took place years after the bullying, but let me tell you, the feeling was magnificent. I was driving one night and I got rear-ended. This took me by surprise, simply because this was at 3 in the morning, and I was the only vehicle on the road at this time in this area, or so I thought. Turns out, he was driving drunk, and I just so happened to have neck pains and trouble sleeping due to the traumatic event. I was able to sue him for enough to pay medical, my vehicle, and a little extra pocket money. That's what you ducking get for pushing me into the locker, Chad. Story 10. 2 random strangers came during a bullying session in a public place, and they punched my bully for some time while calling me their friend. His entire class was afraid of me after that. I still don't know who my saviors were, but thank you. Story 11. I had a friend who had a bully. He had a locker above my friend and would intentionally drop books on her head, push her around, insult her throughout the year, and we all had a class together where he was generally an idiot to anyone that he could. Before class started and anyone else was in class yet, the teacher had to step out for a bit, and it was just us 3 in the room. My friend was and still is very tiny, but that day it didn't matter. She snapped and had enough of his crap and went on the attack. I don't think she could have done much damage on her own, but I stepped in. Puberty was swift for me, and I was one of the largest kids in school. By 5th grade, I was already the size of an adult woman. I pinned him to the wall and let my friend kick the crap out of him and punch him in the balls. He didn't speak to either of us after that, and we never got into any trouble. I don't think he wanted to tell anyone that he got beat up by a couple of girls. Story 12. I learned how to fight, then beat the hell out of him. He left me alone from then on. Got in trouble with the school, but when they called my dad to tell him I was fighting, he said, "Yeah, I bet. I paid for the lessons." Was it that little crap who's been bullying him? I did not get in trouble at home. Story 13. Got bullied by this girl in high school for being fat. Lost 100 pounds after I graduated. I looked completely different. Even some family who didn't see me during the process didn't recognize me. I ran into this girl again 2 years after high school at Starbucks. She started a convo with me as we were stuck at the same table together in a busy Starbucks. We talked. A week later, we boned. And then I added her on Facebook to show her who I was. She just gets sex the fat kid she grew up bullying. Not your traditional revenge. But hey, banging my old bully is worth something, right? Story 14. Not me, but a good friend of mine. Sophomores in high school, Eric, kept a Gatorade in the side pocket of his book bag for lunch every day. Just before second period would start, Eric would put his bag down in class and go to the bathroom. When he would come back, his Gatorade was always empty. This went on for about 2 weeks, and no one would ever tell him who it was. When finally one day he came back from the bathroom to another kid running out of the room, retching and holding his pants. Apparently, Eric had had enough of his Gatorade being taken and had put a few drops, half a bottle, of Visine in the Gatorade before he came to school. The kid had to be admitted to hospital a few days later for dehydration from so much throwing up, diarrhea from the Visine. Eric finally knew who it was, and no one drank his Gatorade anymore. Story 15. This was in kindergarten. Used to get pushed around by a kid, told my dad about it, and he told me to smack him around if he touches me. Fast forward to lining up at the water fountain a few days later. This kid is behind me. He gives me a shove while in line, whatever. I start taking a drink. He pushes me into the wall. I turn around and punch him in the face. He drops crying. Luck would have it. The vice principal would see me punching this kid, but not the kid smashing my head against the wall. Fountain. So I get called into the office, and my dad is called for a meeting. And this is where it goes south for the vice principal. Dad comes in, all pissed off. He works nights, was woken up mid-sleep, and wants to know why I was called to the office. Vice principal tells him of what he saw, and I tell my dad what happened. My dad then proceeds to ask the vice principal, "How in the duck?" Duck echoed down the K3 hallway. "Do you decide to discipline my kid, but not the other kid who has a history of violence in the school?" That conversation got progressively heated, and as it was 20 years ago, I don't remember much else of it. But I do know as the more the vice principal tried to explain himself in vain, the worse his argument became to my dad. At the end of it, I wasn't disciplined. The kid never ducked with me again and moved away in grade 6, and the vice principal took a conveniently timed 2-week holiday beginning the day after this occurred and transferred at the end of the year. Violence solves nothing, they tell you. For me, violence is the only way to keep people from taking advantage of me. Second story. This kid in my grade 9 year liked to pick on me because I was short and stocky. I let him chirp all he wanted until he put hands on me. One shot to the chiclets, and the kid started bleeding from the mouth. This happened in front of a good number of his buddies. Suffice to say, people didn't duck with me anymore after that in high school. I kind of felt bad for him, though. He got some teeth chipped, and his parents didn't have benefits for dental care to get them fixed. So he was kind of ducked in that regard. Story 16. He had been reported to the guidance counselor and faculty repeatedly, but they kept saying, "We can't do anything about it if we don't personally see it happening." Which is like, do you think he's stupid enough to do it in front of you? He also kept calling me Mimi, after the Drew Carey show character. I was getting sick of it after a few months and fruitlessly talking to the guidance counselor about that as well. I finally realized that none of the adults were going to do anything about it. One day at lunch, he called me Mimi, and I turned around and told him, "If you call me that again, you're not going to like my reaction. I don't know what I'm going to do, but you're not going to like it." Which was true. I just figured I'd react in the moment. 30 minutes later, he called me Mimi in the hallway, and I turned around and gave him a big, open palm roundhouse slap across his face. He was completely taken aback. All I had to say was, "I told you you weren't going to like it." I got suspended for a week. My parents were furious at me. However, Matt never harassed anyone again. He was totally polite from that day forward. I don't generally advocate violence, but I still feel like it was a proportional response to months and months of gross behavior on his part, especially in the absence of adults who were willing to hold him accountable. I told the administration and my parents as much when I received my suspension. Big shrug. Story 17. I finally snapped one day and went way overboard. I went full retard, screaming and roaring and hitting him until he was down, and then I just kept hitting him, and kept hitting him, and kept hitting him. To this day, I don't remember ever stopping. I was just down the hall being taken to the office. All I got was IS, which seems like a win for me. Story 18. In high school, I had a verbal bully. He never got physical, but I would always hear about how fat I was or what I was reading. This was early mid-90s, so manga wasn't as mainstream as it is now. He lived a few streets down and his parents knew he did it. They just didn't care. So in my junior year, a new high school opened and I transferred over. He stayed at the old school. I helped set up all the new computers and networks at the new school and graduate. The school then hires me as a computer tech, which was great because it was awesome paying for an 18-year-old. So my first year as a computer tech, and who do I see? That's right, he did something in his senior year at my old school that got him kicked out and had to repeat his junior year. So he was now a year behind me. So I am walking through the hallways with an assistant principal. Damn, I miss him. I would have followed him to a school in hell itself, talking about what computers I was going to move, etc. Bully sees me and just starts up again like no time had passed. I just stare at him and then at the app. He lays into my bully about showing proper respect for the faculty and staff, while my bully just has this dumbfounded look on his face. It was amazing. Story 19. Beat him up until he cried. Turns out, he wasn't a badass, and his friend didn't back him up. He tried to be friendly in the weeks afterward. Last I heard, he had a bad dirt bike accident, got addicted to pills, and was found after 2 weeks in an unowned house. Ducking sad. Edit, his accident happened years later. Story 20. In England, I'm age 15 and I'm on a week-long course with the Naval Cadets, CCF, in Portsmouth. The group has around 20 school kids from various schools. In the ship we're staying on, we have our own bunk space. Around the corner is a group of actual Navy recruits, aged a few years older than us. So one night, a bunch of the recruits invade our bunk space. They grab the 3 youngest-looking kids, which includes me. Their leader takes out a padlock and starts hitting my buddy with it. Then he asks, "Does that hurt?" And my buddy says, "Yes." To which the bully says, "Good, I'll do it some more." After a few more whacks, he starts on another kid, asks the same question, to which the reply is no. And his answer is, "I'll have to do it harder then. I'm next in line and I know what's coming." So when he turned to look at me, I punched him in the face as hard as I could. I was small at 15 and he was 2 years older. 2. And all crap broke loose. First thing that happened was his mate shoved me off the bunk onto the floor and started jumping on me. The rest of my group laid into the recruits. They were smaller but outnumbered the recruits. Someone pulled the guy off me and I was just about to start kicking the crap out of him when the MPs, security, petty officers came in and broke up the fight. We all got dragged into the commander's office and ordered, as in actual military orders, to stay out of each other's bunk space. Next day, I saw the guy I punched, and he had what I assume was a broken nose. I found I had acquired a bit of reputation at school. Sometime later, as I'm walking across the schoolyard, a younger but bigger kid bumped into me. I say something along the lines of, "Hey, watch it." And he says, "Make me." His buddy comes up and drags him off, saying, "Don't duck with him, he's crazy." Story 21. I didn't really get revenge, but rather fates were pretty cruel to them. What happened to them was completely undeserved. One end, he's life's senior year of high school, because he thought he'd go to jail for something minor, which turned out to be all fine and he wouldn't have gone to jail at all. So he literally ended his life for absolutely no reason at all. The second was a year ago. He had decided to drink and go 90 miles an hour down the country back roads. The road curved, he didn't. He was ejected from the car and pass on impact. I still feel bad no matter how horridly they treated me. And believe me, they did treat me horrifically. No one deserves that. Although I did just remember a story where I totally got revenge on this. She was horrid. We were at a retreat I saved for ages to go to, and everyone else was the stereotypical rich kid who didn't like anyone who wasn't rich. They knew my budget for the weekend was $100 and didn't want me to join them for meals. So their solution was to go to $100 steakhouses every night. They called me the poor git, and my roommate for the hotel we were staying in was just awful. So after her being particularly giddy for one day and then leaving for dinner, I realized there was one day left of the retreat, and her underwear drawer was unguarded. I put icy hot on her last pair of clean underwear. Duck you git. Enjoy the burn on that nasty-ass coochie. Maybe next time she'll be a bit more careful who she teases. Story 22. I used to get bullied for my lunch money in middle school by 2 guys for a year, one of which used to be my friend in elementary school. They would sucker slap me across the face from behind, push me against lockers, spear me. This was when Goldberg was popular in WCW. It got worse because this girl, who I am still friends with, would stick up for me. What made it worse was because of the fact she was a girl sticking up for a boy, which in their words made me a git. Well, as time progressed, I started growing pretty rapidly in height, towering over them, while the 2 guys were pretty much the same height or only grew a couple inches. They stopped picking on me physically, obviously, but verbally kept at it. I guess I just snapped because they were picking on one of my other friends for lunch money, and I kneed the guy in the solar plexus and just rammed the other guy's head to a water fountain as hard as I could. The feeling I got after doing that made me so abusive, hyped, and surprised at how light they were. All 3 of us got us for a week. They avoided my presence ever since that incident. I did have to watch my back, though, because their friends threatened to jump me. Nothing came of it, just a bunch of scared, loud hyenas with hurt egos. Story 23. She gave me my order at Dairy Queen. She asked how I was doing, and I told her. Getting a mortgage, engaged, about to graduate with a BS. Asked her how she was doing. Well, I'm here, so it was deliciously awkward. Story 24. I had a kid in middle school who was kind of mean to me and my friends over the course of the year. One day he tried to strangle me in gym class with a cord, kind of jokingly. However, I had had enough and went to the principal with my parents and witnesses of that event. My parents threatened to press attempted murder charges on the kid. Also, he had been caught with a knife in his backpack. Kid was permanently expelled from the school. I believe he is actually in prison now for attempted murder on someone else.